What's up, y'all? You are listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. On today's episode of the Extra Point, if you have followed this show for a little while or this is your first time, one thing you should know, Daniel and I love college football uniforms. And you cannot talk college football uniforms without talking about the Oregon Ducks. And honestly, Daniel, Oregon, I would argue, has not just shaped college football uniforms. I would say they have also shaped NFL uniforms and uniform culture in general, even beyond football. I think what Oregon did with their football uniforms has bled into every sport where we have, Daniel, in every college sport, every pro sport, it used to be a home and away uniform and that was it. I mean, the NBA has, everyone has at least a third alternate. People are doing throwbacks. And honestly, Daniel, this all goes back to the Oregon Ducks made having multiple uniforms popular with football in 1999.
Yeah, I'm excited for this interview. Definitely a big pull by you, Jacob, getting Rick. Just as you said about Oregon, something prior to this revolution happening, Oregon had very regular uniforms, and they completely changed that. It also kind of makes sense that it's bleeding into these other sports because Nike's kind of taking over the uniform game everywhere.
Yes.
City Connects, color rushes, whatever they might be, it
Rivalries.
does seem to all come back to this Oregon uniform. And it was something that was crazy, man. Growing up, definitely be more of a traditionalist, and then kind of just seeing every week there was something different, and then hearing people, old heads tout about Oregon as well, just being like, oh yeah, they'll wear anything, man. They've got so many different combos. So this is very cool, great insight, I think, in this interview, and just something that I think that college football fans, uniform fans, anyone alike will appreciate.
So this interview, Rick Bakas, he was a senior designer for Nike and worked with them during, we'll get into this, but the Denver Broncos redesign in the mid-90s. And then that led into the Oregon redesign in the late 90s. He is an Oregon graduate, so he was so grateful to work on the project for his alma mater. And they tackled the challenge, how do you make a duck look cool? So I have a great interview today with Rick Bakas, one of the designers for the Oregon uniforms that have revolutionized college football and the creator of the Oregon O logo. Let's dive into my conversation with Rick Bakas. Rick, thanks so much for being on the Extra Point. I'd love to know, who are you? What are you up to? What were you doing at Nike in the mid-90s?
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
This is like our third time starting this, so I've heard this a couple of times. But for everyone else who hasn't heard it, Rick, thanks so much for doing this. But would love to know about you and your time at Nike.
Yeah, no worries. As a kid, I fell in love with Nike shoes. I first saw the royal blue and yellow Cortez when they came out. I was in third grade, and when I saw those shoes, at that moment, I decided that I wanted to work for Nike, and that was when I was growing up in Boulder, Colorado. And as fate would have it, our family ended up moving to Oregon. My dad got a promotion in his job, and we were living, I don't know, about 25 minutes away from the Nike campus. And that's where I finished high school. And just, I don't know, it's like it was meant to be. So I went to University of Oregon, and about sophomore year, I started a clothing line, or my friends and I did, because we were into skating and snowboarding. And the clothing line was called Anywhere Gear, and it got picked up by a couple of retail chains, including Nordstrom started carrying it. And yeah, those are good times. But Nike had just started a division of Nike apparel called Team Sports.
Okay.
And that was, Nike was getting into on-field performance head to toe. They wanted everything, all the sideline apparel, but they also wanted to outfit athletes, both in the pros. This was in the NFL, college basketball. There wasn't NBA at the time. We had NHL, but it was really about Nike getting into licensed apparel, because licensed apparel was really exploding at the time. And also what was happening at the time was there was a lot of new team logos coming out. There was an agency called Shawn Michael Edwards, okay, or SME, that was doing a lot of the logo redesigns in pro sports. And so our art director was a guy named Ken Black, and he went to Art Center in Pasadena. So he came from a great education when it came to design. So he was the guy that wrangled all of us. They recruited a bunch of people from across the country. Like they recruited some designers from Gear for Sports in Kansas City. Like half of our department came from that company. And there's a couple other folks. There's one guy named Nate who was a surfer. And so they put together this group of young designers and they sort of like taught us about licensed apparel. And it just so happened as that was starting, this was in 1995, going into 1996, Phil Knight was buddies with Pat Bowlen, who was the owner of the Denver Broncos at the time. And Pat Bowlen came to Phil Knight and he said, the NFL basically had all the team logo designs on lockdown. They were doing everything. And I think they had just done the Baltimore Ravens. I think when Cleveland moved from Baltimore, I think it was around 96. But Pat Bowlen said, I don't want the NFL's design. I don't want their logo flavor. I want a swoosh. I want a horse that's going to be a swoosh. And so he came to Phil and he said, would you guys design a team identity for us? And that, at the time, that was unheard of. And so we're like, yeah, we could do that. And Pat Bowlen said, I want a horse that looks like it's going to kick your ass, basically. Because at the time, like the Broncos, they've got this classic horse in the D, which the fans still love. But, I grew up in Colorado and I've been a Broncos fan. My family actually had season tickets since the late 70s up until about 2003. We had season tickets. So I grew up a Broncos fan.
Yeah. How cool.
So I was like an assistant designer at the time. And I got assigned to the project. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this. It's amazing. And it was like going back to college and getting a master's degree in design because all the people around me were so ridiculously talented. And our art director, our creative director was Todd Van Horn. And they really taught us a lot. We formed a pretty tight group, just all of us designers. We were all young. We were all single, or there was like one guy that had just gotten married, but we did everything together. We had pulled late nighters all the time and we partied all the time. Like we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But we really didn't realize at the time that we were starting this new movement in not only uniforms, but also logo design. And it's just like we weren't going to do what was trendy at the time. We weren't going to follow all the logo design trends that were happening. And we had some pretty strong opinions about what was happening at the time. There was a lot of like cartoony looking logos that were coming out.
Yeah.
If you remember the Gordon's Fishermen, I think it was the New York Islanders when they came out with a logo that was like a guy wearing like fishing gear with a hockey stick.
I'm looking this up. How you see it?
But what we realized at the time is like we had the benefit of being in the apparel department. So we had seamstresses. We could mock up a uniform like right there on the spot. So we had an idea for a logo. We understood when you embroider these cartoony looking logos and you embroider them onto a jersey or a golf polo for the coach, it loses a lot of detail. It looks kind of crappy at small size. And so we started really realizing that the application of these logos onto the garments really matters a lot. And that was like the first step for us to go in a different direction. Like everything was really like intricate, a lot of spikes. I don't know if you remember the Toronto Raptors came out about that time. Even Baltimore Ravens, like all these logos had like a lot of detail. And so when you shrink it down to that size, like the size of your logo on your, by the way, nice polo.
had to wear my Oregon. This is the closest thing to Oregon green I have, and got some yellow in there too. So that's an iconic logo too.
Way to represent.
There you go.
But I guess we had the privilege of learning about making team identities look good at a small size, whether you screen print it, even if you cut it out of like chenille, which is like that carpety type stuff, or so we went with more of a clean, timeless approach. And what was also happening at that time is sort of like what's become an epidemic now, I feel like, with team identities. Like we were really into heritage, like teams like the Lakers or the Green Bay Packers or the Dallas Cowboys, like the Boston Celtics, these teams where their identities haven't changed over time.
Yeah.
The longer that you have that team identity, it becomes so strong that there's something to that. There's a value to it.
Definitely.
And at that, what's that?
I said definitely, absolutely.
That's when the NBA, a couple of teams started changing their logos like every 5 years, like the Houston Rockets, the Atlanta Hawks. Cleveland Cavaliers, and it really, I think, what from a business standpoint, what the NBA realized is every time there's a new logo, it creates a retail spike. So if you look at the chart of like this team's sales, it's like cyclical, like new logo spike, and then it dies off.
Yeah.
New logo spike, and we we were not about that. We were against that. We wanted something that was going to be timeless, and so our art director Ken Black was like a really good designer. He's like, no, we're going to design something. We want it to look amazing even 30 years from now. We're like, that's so far in the future. And I laugh now because it's 30 years later.
I say I'm boring. I'm not. I completely agree with the timelessness. If you ask me like what are my favorite uniforms in college football, I'm gonna tell you Ohio State and Michigan and USC.
Oh, all
And
right. Thanks for your time. Gotta go.
yes, I'm like yeah, sorry, USC, UCLA, which those have changed a little bit over time, but my team is Georgia. I think Georgia, Alabama, Penn State. It's a lot of these teams that don't change it up, but I also like when I look at a team on the field. If you take the logos off the helmet or the word mark on the jersey, do I know who that team is? Is it iconic? And all those teams, you know exactly who it is, and funnily enough, you can say the same exact thing about Oregon, like 95% of the time, because they've built that brand of being different and the bright colors, which we're going to get into. But I didn't realize you were a Broncos fan growing up. That's very cool that you got to then work on that project and work on and then of course you're an Oregon student, so you get to work on the Oregon uniforms as well. It's also funny thinking about Nike just getting into head to toe team sports because I was born in '96. So as this started and grew up a Georgia fan, and I loved Nike growing up because Georgia wore Nike. And I look at some other teams wearing Adidas or Under Armour, and I'm like, I don't think the Nike template is cleaner. I feel like the uniforms are a lot more clean. And I didn't know how to describe it as a kid, but I'm like, I don't want an Adidas polo. I want a Nike polo. I want Nike shoes because Georgia wears Nike, which I'm sure is Nike is loving me saying that right now. I'm sure because that's the goal, right? um,
That's it.
but yeah, it's funny thinking about Nike not being into team sports because now Nike has what baseball, basketball, and football. It's got the big three as the official apparel for all three now, and by far the biggest uniform in college football. And I still think the best template for college football uniforms. The last Adidas one is a step in the right direction, but still think Nike's the best when it comes to college sports. So one thing with the Broncos I wanted to ask about. So Pat Bowling comes to you guys and talks about we want the swoosh for the Broncos. That's the logo I grew up with is the mean looking Bronco. I have an appreciation for the '90s logo, but everything you talked about. So backstory on me: when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to be a designer. Took several graphic design courses, still dabbling a little bit, but I thought about I don't know how to word it, like the brand identity of sure you can have the complicated logo, but you also have to have the icon because of what you said of it's got to fit on a polo and you still know what it is and be simple enough for someone to draw, a kid to draw and remember. Um, and you can have the big brand, but it's got to be simple. You got to have a simple version of it. So I loved you talking about that too. With the Broncos, what's that design process like? So I know at that time the NFL, not everyone wore the same apparel company. Like you had like Reebok, Adidas, Starter. Broncos are going to go with Nike at this time. What did that design process look like?
There's a lot that was happening there in terms of, well, you got to understand everything with Nike is about balancing technology with design, right? Like
Yeah.
the amount of testing and the amount of money that's spent, everything there, every product has to have some sort of technological advancement as well as be beautifully designed. So it's all about working the technology into the design. And a perfect example is the Air Max shoe, like the Air Sole, right?
I'm wearing some right now.
It's
Visual
what's
technology, right?
that's it. It's functional, but it's also a major design element. And that's actually really hard to achieve. But that was the mindset. That's what we did with everything. That's when Nike was getting to glasses. That's when they did their first watch.
Okay.
All of it, same idea. But we had a secret weapon on our team that no one really talks about to this day. His name is David Turner, and David is, I guess, more a reclusive Canadian designer, but he was our uniform apparel designer. He didn't do graphics. that was a guy that was like cutting out like pieces of fabric and piecing them together. And what he came out with at that time was he'd been experimenting with something called a bat wing jersey. And if you go back to what football uniforms looked like before that, they were loose fitting, like you would have the stitch across here,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you have like loose fabric that would hang down, and they were just like kind of like functional. Going back to like 1920 or whenever the first football uniforms were made, you got
Yep.
to go in the NFL Hall of Fame's archives, and they pulled out a bunch of old jerseys from like there was one. It was like Acme Painters out of Ohio, and it was like this jersey from like 1918 or something like that. It looked like a dress almost. But the point being is that David figured out that linemen, or like when you have these baggy shirts that are like heavy duty, it's really easy to hold on to. If you're a lineman and like in football, like they could grab you and like move you all around and put you where they wanted you to go. And so David came out with this thing called a bat wing, and it was essentially the Denver Broncos jersey was the first one to use this. And it was like a huge advancement in technology in terms of how uniforms were created, but we're also showing the technology like the air sole. And so the stripes that came up, the people thought they were swooshes. They
Uh-huh.
weren't swooshes. They were hinges, basically, because you had like your fabric material here, you had your fabric material on your chest, and then those things were like a neoprene that would adhere to your body. So if you lifted your arm, it would still suck in, and it was a much harder, but it was more form fitting,
Yep.
and the players loved it. They actually breathed better, but it was a complete revolution in uniform technology. So he was doing that. And then our team, we started researching what the Broncos meant. And our art director, Ken Black, was really great at teaching us about design process and really being thorough about it. Like we spent almost 2 months before we even started sketching ideas, just researching everything we could. That was, going to the NFL Hall of Fame. We got to go through all the old Bronco stuff. Like growing up there, I was familiar with a lot of the history,
Yeah.
but um, we started honing in on this idea of uncontrollable forces in nature, which is kind of like what a Bronco is. We were looking at
Uh-huh.
tsunamis and volcanoes and earthquakes, stuff like that, that man cannot tame. And we started the early versions, like we worked on this for 9 months, right? So like after all the research, remember the first day we sat down and actually started sketching, we all brought in like notepads of paper. There was like 6 of us. There's Ken, our art director. There was a senior designer named David Odesanya, who's this British guy who didn't know anything about American football, and he's the guy that did most of the design work on the thing. I was his assistant designer, and then there was a couple other people. I think there was a footwear designer in there as well. And we started like sketching. So it's like the rule was you got 30 seconds, sketch something, throw it on the table, sketch something. So we did this for a while. And when we were done, we had this huge conference table full of horse sketches. And we started honing in on the ones that were taking on wave forms because
Okay.
we were like really interested in like this whole tsunami idea. And what transpired from there was multiple rounds of narrowing it down to like 10 really good concepts, narrow those down to like 3. And then we worked on those for probably like 2 months, and just like every little iteration of the logo, just like the shape of it. We spent like 2 weeks just doing the eye,
Okay.
and we just like we were obsessed about it because this was our first foray into this. So
Yeah.
Nike was it was very important that we nailed it. And I don't know how much money they spent, but Nike didn't even charge the Broncos for it. Come to think of it, but a lot of late nights. And what I was doing is I was taking everybody's design and I would go into Illustrator and I would digitize, sketch all of them, make some tweaks, modifications, suggestions. But I was doing a lot of the grunt work of like archiving everything, putting it into the server, sorting it, making notes, getting ready for presentations. So we went through like 3 rounds of full-on presentations to the Broncos brass and Pat Bowlen. So each time we did those, we had to put together these 6-foot tall boards that we would put on foam cores like an inch thick, and we had like I forgot what company did it, but these boards were huge. And then we'd
Yeah.
fill their conference room. We've shipped them out there, and we'd turn around one at a time and reveal our concepts. And so we started applying these graphics to David Turner's Batwing jersey,
Uh-huh.
and like started to come together. We were also working with the footwear department. There's a guy named Tracy Teague who designed all the football cleats.
Okay.
And to make a long story short, it took a couple rounds, and I think it was like it was after the second round that Ken Black came across this Native American legend of a ghost horse of the plains. So he was still like digging into it. And he found this legend, and it's about this ghost horse that was so spirited and so strong that it couldn't be tamed. And we're like, like he had the moment. Okay, so we're 4 months into the project. That's when the light bulb went off. Like, oh, so the horse is white because it's a ghost. And the orange represents the orange. If you look, the eyeballs are orange on the
Yep.
horse, and the eyes are the windows to the soul, and the soul is a fiery belly. So that's where the orange comes from. And it wasn't lost on us that I think a lot of Broncos fans would disagree with this, but Pat Bowlen didn't like the old logo. It represented 4 Super Bowls where they just got completely blown out of the water. And as a fan, I can tell you there's a lot of PTSD, and I could appreciate that. I didn't really like the horse. We used to call it the anorexic horse because you could see its ribs.
Yeah, yeah.
Horse in the D. Like everybody wants to bring it back, and now it's got like this vintage appeal, which I get. But when we finished this project, Steve Atwater was the first person to put on the new navy blue with the orange highlights. We just treated orange like a pop color.
Mm-hmm.
He put that on, and he had worn the old jerseys, but he put on
Right.
a new one. He said, I feel so badass right now. It was like just the psychology of how the players felt going from like that orange and that blue, which looks cool, but then you go
Yeah.
to this like badass or like horse that looks like it's going to kick your ass. The players adopted that, and lo and behold, they go out and they win 2 Super Bowls back to back.
Which I'm sure helped. I'm like that.
I take all the credit.
Yeah, nothing says this design works like winning on the field. I think everyone will get behind that real quick. I
Uh-huh.
also read the Steve Atwater quote: "The navy blue looks meaner than orange," because it was an orange primary jersey before to a navy primary jersey, which again I grew up on. This was the Broncos look that when I think of the Broncos, I think of the Batwing jersey and the navy. And when they kind of switched to the orange primary with the Batwing template, was that around when Peyton Manning got there? I was like, I don't know. I kind of miss the Navy. When I think about the Broncos, I think about the Navy, and of course they've gone orange primary again now. But yes, that is the. What's funny is give it another 5-10 years, and this will be a throwback jersey for the Broncos. Will be the Batwing jersey, which is hard to believe because at the time, and it still looks modern. Like it looks modern. Um, and I love the visual tech. When I read that when I was researching this, I was like, this is all over Nike. The Air Maxes were something that came up. I remember growing up like Nike Shocks. That was something I
Mhm.
loved wearing. Like that's visual technology.
Yeah.
And then when I was in high school, really getting into uniforms, I remember the fly wire collar was something that again like visual tech design element. That's also you're seeing the technology. I thought that was really cool. So the Broncos redesign, what at the time was it seen as a huge success? It was very different to other NFL uniforms, but at the time was it seen as everyone wanting to jump on board and have something similar, even from a technology perspective and with design as well?
It was disruptive, but there was also a lot of haters. Well, main hater was Woody Page, who's the
Uh-huh.
writer from Denver.
Around the
And
horn.
yeah, that just this is before Twitter, but
Yeah.
Woody is such a curmudgeon and just was bashing. He said like his whole thing was like this was like before trolling was a thing. Like he was
Yeah,
trolling through his articles, and it's just it was the early days of realizing that controversy sells newspapers, right? Like
that's right.
so his whole thing wasn't about any of what we're talking about. It was just like, oh, Nike has snuck their logo into the he thought the nostril of the horse was a swoosh, and he's like, oh, then on the uniforms it's a swoosh. It's all subconscious. Nike's taking over. There was a lot of pushback on the fact that Nike designed all this stuff, and it was
Yeah.
more anti-Nike than we did something amazing. And when they went out and won the Super Bowl, it shut a lot of people up. Didn't shut him up, but back to back was yeah, they didn't like the reducing the orange, and ever since then, the navy and all as a primary color, the fan base has always said we're Orange Crush, and I think eventually the new ownership has sort of like caved a little bit, and they're like, oh, the fans want orange, let's go back to orange. So
Navy
But
looks meaner than orange.
I think so.
I think so too. Which again, I grew up a Georgia fan, so I hate orange. All our rivals were orange, and so I'm
Oh
anti-orange.
yeah.
So I was team navy blue, for sure. Okay, so we had to talk about the Broncos because I feel like that sets the stage for Oregon. I know you went to Oregon. You're a proud Duck. It's funny because as a kid, when you play the video game growing up, you're either going to play your favorite team, players you like, or in my case, if we're going to do random teams that are not our favorite, because all of us are Georgia fans, so we can't pick Georgia. I want to choose the team that looks cool. And so even as a kid, I'm picking Oregon because of the different uniforms. I feel like you can't think about Oregon football without thinking about uniforms, which was not the case as you're working on this project. I feel like Oregon football was probably, at this point, they hadn't won much. And so, pretty forgettable football program. I don't think would be too demeaning. Not anymore. Iconic program now. I think one of the top four programs in the country now. Uh,
Well, that's because of the Georgia boy, Dan Lanning's doing his job.
that's right. I love Dan Lanning. That's right. Doing his job.
That's why I'm a Georgia fan now because he came from Georgia, so it's like
See,
that's my team on the East.
and we root for Oregon for the same reason. We're like, yes,
Yeah.
go succeed, Dan Lanning. I want to see the cool uniforms win. I want to see a team that looks cool win. Can't have another Adidas Indiana team win. Can't have that happen. Anyway, uh, okay, so Oregon, obviously, Phil Knight, Oregon grad, kind of invented the shoe running track at Oregon. Where did the project start? Was this a Phil Knight idea? Was this Coach Bellotti coming and saying we want to be different? Where did the idea of let's make Oregon into an icon, let's be different, let's be bold? Where did this idea start?
Well, this is where we're going to start getting into who gets credit for
Okay,
what on the
I love
Oregon
it.
project. So we just come off the Broncos, and then I think there were some meetings that were happening outside of our group because we were just the designers, right? We were the grunts. My boss, there was Ken Black, and then the creative director was Todd Van Horn, which is a name that you hear a lot. I think Todd was probably having meetings with Tinker Hatfield, which is a legendary Nike designer, footwear, invented the air sole, designed all the Jordans. I mean, Tinker really is actually, he lives in not too far from me now. But they were probably having meetings about what to do with Oregon. I think there was quite a bit of success with the Broncos. We were feeling pretty good about it. And so they're like, okay, let's do for Oregon what we did for the Broncos. And when I went to school there, I remember watching like Bill Musgrave and going to games there and just not liking the uniforms. And this is when I had my apparel company, right? Like I was a
Right.
apparel designer. So I'm like, I don't like those. I like the Donald Duck, which is great, but
Yeah.
and the interlocking UO was fine, but it felt like a small market team. And I was just like, man, it would be cool to redo those uniforms. I had no idea like 3 years later. So I went from being an assistant designer to the Oregon project. I was asked to be the lead designer on that.
Very cool.
Because the designer who was the senior designer of the Broncos, David Odesanya, he moved into designing Nike's first website, which is kind of crazy. That's when companies' first websites were popping up.
Yeah.
And this actually, I remember like when they first integrated the first Nike email system, we didn't even have email addresses. It wasn't like Rick at Nike. It was like CompuServe. It was like 12 digits at, I don't even know. So there was a lot happening in the world of technology at the time. And there was no Nike.com, believe it or not.
That is crazy.
But we went, now that the design process, we had really, it was drilled into our heads. We just did the same thing. So we started doing a lot of research. Obviously for me, it was great because I'm a Duck, and I did the same thing I did with the Broncos. I just threw everything, all my time and energy into it. I just like obsessed about it. I dug into every nook and cranny of this project that I could. And I started researching kind of like the Broncos. We abstracted away from just like, well, we asked ourselves the first meeting, like, how do you make a duck look cool?
Fair question. That's fair question.
Right. I mean, like, we're like, we have a serious challenge here. Like a Bronco is one thing because a Bronco, we know, will kick your ass, but a duck. But we kind of had an advantage because we're on the Pacific Rim. And so I started diving into like anime and technology on the Pacific Rim, like bullet trains. I was really fascinated with just like the futurism that was coming out of
Yeah.
like, Japan, and just like some of these futuristic designers, and just like thinking about, yeah, the future and kind of like the mindset that we wanted to have of what the Ducks should represent, because if they're going to represent Nike, which is this company that's all about balancing technology with design, that was like the mindset we had to get into.
Right.
And it was around that time we were doing the research, started diving into like the going back to the 1800s and just learning everything I could about Oregon football from the very first team, and digging up old pictures and old players. I didn't realize Ken Kesey was like a wrestler at Oregon in the 60s. So that's kind of cool. But we went to the auto show. Like, one cool thing that Nike used to do back then is they would give us all money or a budget as designers to go do something cool. Just go get inspired. It was a freewheeling days.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
like, there was one guy in our department, him and his buddy, they rented a convertible Cadillac and they drove Route 66 to get inspired. Like, they drove the whole route.
Why not?
Got all sorts of like cool inspiration for design and vintage design and everything. And we used to have annual designer events where they'd fly all the designers from around the world, like Nike Europe, Nike Asia. We'd all get together and do like design camps. So it was just like they really wanted us to do also. So we went to the Detroit Auto Show, and that was the year that Chroma Flare color changing paint came out. And it's just like, whoa, that's like, when you look at a car, it's like, is it purple? Is it teal? Is it green?
Mm.
And that was the year that it was released. And I remember like just going around seeing everything, and I looked at all their colors. I'm like, huh, they have a green. That's kind of cool. Just like put it away in the back pocket or put it in my backpack. And then when we got back to the campus, this is when we were like starting to get into like sketching the O's. Like, should it be a UO? Should it be interlocking? Should it be? And we were also, they had like a whole design library Nike did on campus. It was like the size of a city library, but it was all design stuff.
Very cool.
See, it was just like catnip for designers. And they had like a color room where like they had this like perfect light, where it's like, I forgot what they called it, but it was like the perfect spectrum of light. So if you were looking at team colors, it's like, what version of green should we do? And I pulled out that Chroma Flare green. I was just like looking, I'm like, I think that day on lunch is when I was having a Subway sandwich out by the lake, and I was like feeding bread to the ducks, and I was looking at that Mallard's head, and I'm like, that's something cool about a duck, that iridescent head.
That's right.
And just like, I had the aha moment, kind of like the ghost horse. I was like, huh, that Chroma Flare paint kind of looks like that. And that's where I started putting it together. And I took that into that light studio, and I would put it under the light, and it would like, the color shift was pretty dramatic. It went from this like limeish light Kelly green to like a dark forest green, and the way it would shift color was so cool. And I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool if it was like Notre Dame, where you just like made a statement, just like boom, with that green.
Yeah.
And I started pulling out the light green and the dark green. And I was like, what is that color? What's the PMS of each of those? And there's also a yellow, like there's a state flower. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it has this yellow in it, which became our yellow. So it's like we had our two greens and we had our yellow. And at that time, going back to David Turner, he had a lot of success with the Batwing and the Broncos. But after that, he had already been working on the next thing, which he called the Cordura jersey. And it took the Batwing concept to another level.
Yeah.
And I just remember David Turner was such a cool guy. He was so easygoing, and he was just way ahead of his time, and he doesn't get enough credit. But he was playing around with single piece uniforms where you just like have a flap in the back, and you'd like put the whole thing on, so it would be the legs and the top.
Interesting.
And we used to talk about the future, like what will this look like in 50 years? Like the Oregon Ducks. What will football uniforms look like? What will technology look like? And so we were kind of like, let's design for that right now. And all this was going back to the whole concept of Pacific Rim, bullet trains, being fast, yada, yada, yada. And that was like kind of steered us down the path. With the O, I did a lot of different sort of like futuristic, kooky looking O's that were using negative space in different ways. There was one that almost looks like a Star Trek logo. If you Google my name and Oregon brand, you can see some of the sketches, and you'll see it on there. But there was one night, this was about 2 months into the design process, and there was like a couple other guys that we were just like sketching different ideas. And I remember I was like, what is it about the school? And I remember running the steps at Hayward Field because it was right next to where I lived. And so I'd run those steps all the time. And it's just like, I remember how much I hated it, but I was like, Hayward Field is such an important part of this whole thing, not only about Oregon, but so Nike is like, and maybe it was just being tired or a little kooky at the time. I was like, that's the shape of a circle. I was like, huh. So I kind of like drew that like track shape. And I was like, Autzen Stadium is this shape, like the footprint. If you look at it, I'm like, what happens if you like punch that out of there? Like, you got to remember, this is at the time when Oakley was just suing everybody. If he came out with a logo that looked anything like an O, it didn't matter. Like Oakley was very, very aggressive. Their legal department was going after everyone. So we had to design an O that wouldn't get us sued at the same time. So
Totally fair.
yeah, and I looked at him like Oakley could not sue us for this. That was like my first thought, or they couldn't sue Nike. And I was just like, huh. And so I remember Todd Van Horn came in the next morning, and another designer named Michael Scheibel, who was like the other main designer that worked with me. And I showed him, and Michael's like, "Oh my God, that's the O. That's it." And Tinker had kind of like behind the scenes had suggested like maybe just like a single O is the way to go instead of an interlocking U of O. Tinker Hatfield was not. I didn't talk to him at all through this project. I talked to the footwear designer Tracy Teague, showed him the chroma flare pans. Like, this is what we're gonna put on the helmet.
Yeah.
Can you put this on the shoe? And so we were like talking about head to toe. And yeah, even Todd was like, I think that's it. I think that's the O. And so we started playing around with the helmets. And one thing that was funny is when he painted football helmets with this chroma flare, we didn't know it, but it would break down the plastic. Like the way this paint, it was formulated for metal.
Yeah.
And so one day, like we were testing it, and we're like, maybe we should just test it and just make sure everything's good. Like you can spray it, like, oh, it looks great. So we took a 5 pound weight and we dropped it, and the helmet shattered.
Oh no.
Like, oh my God, what?
That's a problem.
We tested, like, can you imagine like opening kickoff first day they're wearing these new uniforms and everybody runs down the field and all their helmets explode? Like, oh my God.
That's a fast way to get sued.
Um, so this was, we're like, okay, we need to kind of like figure out the formulation of this paint. And we started talking to Riddell, who was making the helmets at the time. And Riddell thought that we were going to try and acquire them. They're like, oh my God, you're getting into football. Like, we don't want to work with you. So like Riddell was not willing to work with us because they thought that for some reason we were going to, I don't know, take over. Or like, I'm like, no, we just want to make sure that these helmets don't explode when they're
Right.
playing football. And so, yeah, we were just like, there's so many late nights where we just like would get delirious. And I remember one night we were like talking about like, let's paint the helmets that color and let's put some big googly eyes on the side. So when they run down the first play, like the eyes roll around. You gotta have fun while you're doing this, right?
Gotta have fun. That's required. And okay,
Yeah.
did I read correctly too that I know you mentioned Notre Dame. Was the first thought that the chroma flare paint would be the helmet, like no logo on the side, kind of like Notre Dame, just a plain helmet, O in the middle, and let the helmet be the icon?
Yeah, it was like we thought it was a statement because it was such a cool color and this paint
Yeah.
was so new. And it was like it looked exactly like a mallard's head. So, but we looked at it, and it's just like it didn't have the same effect as the gold. And so that was what led to this was the first time that the rubber logo was put up here that had never been
Okay.
done before. And
Didn't
so
realize
like
it
I
was
had,
that early.
yeah. So there's a lot of innovation that was happening there. And eventually we're like, yeah, we need to put the O on the helmet. So this was like 1998, I think. And yeah, that's when things started coming together and we started moving much quicker. And I got to present to Phil Knight and Dave Frommeyer, who was the then president of University of Oregon,
Okay.
and Todd Van Horn and a couple other like the athletic director. But it was overlooking the field at Autzen. There's like 6 foot boards, all that stuff. And I was like so nervous. I almost shit my pants when I had to get in front of Phil Knight and present.
Yeah.
Like, this is a baby, right? Tinker wasn't there for that, I don't think. But I just remember as soon as I said the part to Phil about Hayward Field and Autzen Stadium, and that's what makes up the O, I could just like see his eyes light up. Like he's like, oh, okay, yeah, and that's what closed it.
I feel like people are dying to come up with a logo that looks iconic and then has meaning behind it, but is so simple. And you did it with the Oregon O. I didn't know this, and this is years ago. I remember, again, I'm a college football junkie, so I just go on Google Earth and look at other football stadiums for fun because that's what football junkies do for fun. And I remember looking at Autzen Stadium from above and thinking, that kind of looks like their logo. I'm like, I wonder if that was on purpose. I'm like, it's a little bit different because they've added to it since. But I'm like, that's weird that kind of looks like the Oregon O from above. I'm like, that's kind of like the outline. But of course, I'm doing research for this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it absolutely is the Oregon O. But for it to be so simple and now iconic, it's synonymous with Oregon. I don't think there's any confusion with Oakley. Um,
Mm.
and like you said, for Hayward Field to be in the middle, which, Phil Knight and Blue Ribbon Sports, was that what he first had his company called before Nike? Like getting the start at Hayward Field, and Oregon track is iconic. And now you have this brand identity that, again, people are so starving to create something like that, for it to be so simple, have so much meaning built into it. You see any redesign. I'm reading through the Titan stuff this last week that they just designed, and I love seeing the graphics of pointing out all the meaning, like on the jersey, and like this font is from Fourth Street, and da 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 da. It's like everyone's dying for it, but for it to be so simple and so iconic, again, it's a joy just to hear it from you, because it is an iconic logo, and it's synonymous with college football now, which again was not the case in the '90s. And I know Oregon, if we talk about the on the field performance a little bit, they're on the back of, was it a Cotton Bowl loss? It was like the Oregon had their first couple really good seasons, and now you get the iconic uniforms to go with it. Of okay, well let's make a name for ourselves. Uh, what did you call the jersey? That first jersey design? I know you had the Batwing for the Broncos. What did you call this new template that they came up with?
The Cordura.
Cordura. That's right. And let me ask you this. Okay, I look at it and I'm like, okay, that looks black. I know it's supposed to be forest green. Did the green turn out how y'all had hoped? Like that dark green for the main part of the uniform? Or was it, looking back, or you're like, all right, that was a little dark?
Um, it is dark. I've got the uniform on the
Yeah,
wall
you
right
got
there.
one. Of course, you have to.
Um, I think this was coming off the Denver Broncos, just hearing Steve Atwater's comments about the blue. Maybe that was just resonating in our
Yeah.
brains at the time. But we're like, yeah, dark is good, because everybody was doing black at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I was involved with that for the first 2 years. When I left Nike in 2003, that's when Todd Van Horn and Tinker really took the uniforms, and that's when the uniform thing really started happening. I mean, they had the same uniform the first couple of years that I was there, but when I left Nike is really when the uniforms took on a life of their own. They started doing I think it's when Tinker Hatfield got involved with like more directly with the head to toe design of what they're wearing.
The first iconic one I can think of was the '06 redesign. So you had y'all's 99 design, '03. '06, you had the diamond plates. And that's the first ones I remember with. That's the first one I remember playing on the video game. They added a black uniform. And the green kind of became, I say, more of a forest green. It was a dark green still. Of course, they use the Kelly green a lot now. That bright yellow. Did y'all have a name for that yellow? When the one that, 'cause it's kind of
Yeah, it's called lightning yellow.
lightning yellow. Okay. I had read that. I'm like, again, got to hear it from the source. Lightning yellow. Uh, so why the change from, because I know it was more of a green and gold to that point, like '70s, '80s, '90s. Why the change from that darker gold to the lightning yellow?
I think it was because we pulled it out of that state flower, the Oregon state flower.
That's right.
It had
The state
the
flower.
yellow in it, and it might have also been to offset the darkness of the green,
Yeah.
because I think it looked a little too muddy, if I remember right, that gold.
And now, again, synonymous with Oregon. And it's such a cool complement color. When they started rolling out the black uniforms or the darker green, that bright yellow, even some of the bright yellow uniforms, like the highlighter uniforms, I thought looked awesome whenever they finally rolled around. Of course,
Well, like Jacob, look at the logo for the Masters on
yeah,
your, like that's almost the yellow and that's
yeah,
almost the green,
it's
right?
bright.
So imagine that if it was like more of a gold, like Notre Dame gold or something.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. Like UAB is that's too dark, two dark colors together. Um,
Yeah,
doesn't work.
in
Okay,
contrast.
at the time, how are the new uniforms received by the Oregon fan base first and then nationally? Of course, just on the heels of the Broncos. So is there excitement for uniforms at that time? Did the Oregon fans hate it at first and grow on them? What was the reception?
It was different than the Broncos. The Broncos fans definitely were a lot more opinionated. And what's different about pro sports and college sports is with pro sports, you really kind of have the same fan base every year, right? And that I think is why partially why like the NBA, why they keep cranking out new logos. It's just like the same fan base isn't going to keep buying apparel. If they have one or two things, but with the Oregon fans, like every year you have new alumni or new parents, new students coming in, and weed is legal here. So I think a lot of fans are like, it's cool, man. It's all good. Like, people are so easy going. I mean, we
Yeah.
weren't a big deal. We were just like in our little corner of the world. Around that time is when Phil sort of helped announce the expansion of the stadium. Like there was a whole push for a national championship. Like we were putting it together these
Still.
high class recruiting suitcases. They were almost like look like in the movies when you have like the guy who has like the handcuff to
Uh-huh.
the the switch that will launch the nukes, and like we were putting together like these recruiting briefcases that were amazing. Put a lot of money into them. He helped put money into the stadium. So all this was intentional, and it started back then. So I think the fans were just the bar was pretty low. So anything that was going to help them be better, I think, was like, all right, that's cool.
What was player reaction? I know Steve Atwater, you're talking about the Broncos, was these are college kids. I assume very excited, but what was player reaction at the time when they first got to put on these new uniforms?
I don't know, other than Ruben Drones, who was the very first player who put it on,
Okay.
and he liked it. He liked the way it fit because it was even more breathable than the Batwing.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying how much he liked just like how tight it fit. Joey Harrington was, I think, that was the year they made the push for the Heisman, and the Ducks finished number 2 that first season. So I think overall they had a pretty positive feeling about it.
Yeah.
It's like this is also coming off the Broncos, and so there was like now a precedent. Like there was like it wasn't just out of the blue. So I think there was a lot of things that sort of like helped everyone feel good about it. And I think generally I didn't hear any complaints from any of the players.
Or it's so funny because nowadays, I mean, it seems like 75 to 80% of schools are putting out their this week's uniform combination in college football, especially, but NFL too, honestly. And it's like a big deal of like Thursday before Saturdays, you get the uniform reveal of what your team's wearing that week. And that was so unheard of. Even in, I mean, I'm looking, I cataloged all the uniforms. 2006 was the first year, or I think it's 9 or 11 different combos were worn. Where Oregon mixed it up before then, but then it's just every week's a different uniform. And Oregon started this just different modern uniform. I'm trying to remember or other schools that I feel like copied after that. TCU comes to mind, another Nike school. Uh,
Mm.
but you guys started this iconic thing with college football, which is uniforms. And I feel like fans now are very into uniforms. And I can't speak to how into uniforms fans were in the 90s, but because things change so often now, and even your own team coming out with cool, one-off alternates or just a different color combo of jersey pant that you might have. I feel like uniforms are synonymous with college football, and it's one of the things that I love about college football. And you can't talk uniforms in college football without talking about Oregon. So at the time, did you guys realize you're working on something that iconic, or is it this is fun to do for our in-town school that several of you guys are alumni of? Like, how did it feel at the time compared to looking back, how iconic it is now that you got to work on this project?
I think at the time the main goal was just like let's make Oregon a national contender. We need to recruit better players, and so that was really the first thought, first and foremost. But I think everything you do at Nike, you design everything that we do there or did when I was there was you have the mentality like this is going to make some sort of design impact.
Yeah,
It's almost just like you expect it because whatever Nike does, they do it on such a large scale that if you have the smart people around you and everybody makes smart decisions and you design for what's appropriate for that project and not listen to outside noise, like we are very intentional about doing what is right for this particular project, regardless. I mean, we had that with the Broncos and like the fan pushback and like the trolling, all that stuff we already covered. It was, we knew that we had done the right thing. And when Nike does something, they do it at scale. So it's like, I guess we expected there to be some sort of impact because we were pretty proud of our design as a group. But this time we were also starting to work on some MDA projects. Like we started working on the Dallas Mavericks. That's when Ross Perot owned the team right before
Okay.
he sold it to Mark Cuban, and we were doing some ideation for Portland Trailblazers. So we had like a whole part of our department where we were starting to do the same thing for them, and it was smart business for Nike to do these logos, not charge the team, but we would work out an exclusive where for the first 6 months, when the new gear comes out, only Nike can release the new gear.
Okay.
After 6 months, then Wilson and Starter and whoever else can come out with their versions of it, right? So it was like really smart because that's when everybody buys their stuff, right?
That's right.
It was really it was pretty smart. So years later, I think when Chip Kelly joined Oregon, and then they started. Well, I should say like that first year when they reached number two, that was the highest that the Ducks had ever finished, and so that was like the first scratching of the
Yeah.
surface. Like, oh, maybe this new chapter could be something
Yeah.
amazing. So, like every year now we have hope that we're going to do something, and like Georgia, you guys just expect it. Like every year we're a perennial
Spoiled.
contender. Yeah, like anchor of SEC and like college football. I should mention that David Turner and I, like, we used to just sort of like hang out and talk about all things like snowboarding. That's when I, still had my snowboarding line, and his son was getting into skiing. But we used to talk about like really future vision, what our football uniform is going to look like, and we really thought quite a bit, like 50 years from now, what's going to look like. And so I think last year I put out a tweet that just sort of like summarized what we used to talk about, and I put out some sketches. I don't know if you saw that, but
I
it
think I
was
bookmarked a couple of these because I was deep diving like what's out there, what can I find before I reached out to you.
yeah, so they're like in the tweet I talked about some of the ideas of smart fabrics that can measure your vitals and like send it to the coaching staff. And like we were exploring the idea of how, for example, like cuttlefish and octopuses change color, like they change the color of their skin, like color changing fabric that would have your number, right? And like super futuristic fonts and totally redesigned helmets and like all this different stuff. So I put out this tweet, and I sort of like I used AI to imagine or capture what we were talking about back then. And even that, it's like we're halfway to that 50-year mark. We're 25 years into this, and it's just like let's check in and sort of like see how we're doing on this path to these like futuristic jerseys.
Which again, I mean, I even think about I watch, teams will put videos of teams putting their uniforms on, and even when I played in high school, like putting a uniform on and how tight the game worn jersey is for the same reason of it's so that no one can grab it. And really that didn't start until the Broncos and Oregon making the tighter fitting jerseys. Again, visual technology. One, it looked better than a loose fitting baggy jersey, but also players can't grab on, harder to tackle when there's nothing hanging off for people to grab onto, or at the line of scrimmage, people to hold, making a block. So I think y'all were well ahead of your time as you designed these. Let me ask you this, Rick: is there something that maybe I'll say college fans, intense college fans like me, or people that are just Googling Oregon uniforms, what's something they might not know about the original rebrand that maybe you've got in your back pocket? Little inside info.
um well, I think this is somewhat related, but one of my good friends that I worked with was a guy named Rodney Richardson, and I absolutely love this guy. He was the only dude that was married in our group,
Yeah.
and he had just moved from Mississippi. So he and his wife were from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and he moved out there, and he was just so easygoing. He just had like this just way about him. Like he was so chill, but he was like my favorite guy, and we just remained friends over the years. And when he left Nike, he started his own rare design agency. He moved back to Hattiesburg, him and his wife, and they started a family. But he really kept the tradition. Like he took everything that we learned, and he was the one that was really successful at having a life post Nike because a lot of us had left, like early 2000s. But he designed the Houston Texans logo,
Cool.
and he designed the. So he started his agency, and like I remember he talked about struggling in the early days, and his faith got him through a lot of the tough times after the Houston. This was before Houston, but it took him a while. He didn't just come out of Nike like boom, like getting projects left and right. Like he struggled, but then after that, then he started getting a bunch of NBA redesigns. Like he redid the Pelicans. I want to say he did the Hawks one time. He became the design agency for NASCAR. He did
Cool.
the latest Timberwolves, Milwaukee Brewers, and so he really like we would talk about the design principles that we learned back then, and we were like such purists and all the design trends that are happening now. People coming out, it's like design has almost become commoditized. But we're like, maybe we should start like a senior council of like all of us who came out of that group with Nike because it was such a special time and such a special group, and we really feel like sports branding has gotten away from what we were trying to do, especially like the NBA is just like cranking out new logos and watering it down. And I've written articles about it. And it's just like I wrote an article for uh I forgot what website it was, but it was when there was the 32 different LeBron James jerseys for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it was just like, will the real Cleveland Cavaliers please stand up? And it's just like
Yeah.
it was but it's all about making money, right? Like so
Yeah.
it's like sacrificed
Sell more
design
jerseys.
integrity for the business because they're not making enough money apparently. And
Apparently.
so Rodney Richardson is just someone that I want people to remember because he was like a pretty special, amazing human, and he lost a battle with cancer now 3 years ago. And I don't know, he and I had talked about getting back together and wanting to was going to open a West Coast office of his design agency. This was right when he got diagnosed with cancer. And we're like, we need to do something for the sports industry because the leadership, someone needs to lead us in the right direction.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, and what's funny is a couple of years ago, the Denver Broncos had a graphic designer position open, and just for shits, I'm like, I'm going to apply to this and just see what happens. Didn't even get a response. I'm like,
didn't
I'm the
even get
guy.
a response.
No,
We could have a
like,
whole nother. I have another podcast about the business industry and why that's a problem. We could probably go have another hour-long conversation about. Didn't even get a response. Helped to design the iconic uniforms. Didn't even get a response, which is great. Um, Rick, do you have a favorite template or jersey that Oregon has worn or uniform that Oregon has worn since 1999?
yeah, it would be the uniforms they wore in the Fiesta Bowl against Auburn. In
Really?
yeah, because
So, like, sorry, you go ahead.
yeah, I love those because they're white and the way they used silver, and like some of the pin lines, like that was the year I thought they were really going to win it. And it was
Me
just like
too.
because of a fluke play, like Auburn and their fluke plays.
Oh yeah, that year. I well aware. It's another other years too. Yeah, that was the Michael Dyer was down. I still think he was down, by the way. So I'll stand with you there. I loved that uniform. I feel like I see online now. Is there a curse of Oregon not wearing green and yellow in big games? Because you had that game, you had the 2014, they wore all white against Ohio State. Uh, I think people were worried about it this year heading into the Texas Tech game, but I see that online sometimes. I thought those uniforms were awesome. You had the carbon fiber helmet. I'm looking at it now. It was more of a true highlighter yellow and not this yellow on that uniform.
Yeah.
The gray pants, yeah, those were cool. Okay, my favorite template is the 2012 it was the second duck wing. It was not the ones in the Fiesta Bowl were like actual little wings. It was the one that incorporated the wing into the whole shoulders. Like
Mm,
I say, like the Marcus Mariota template, the one that he wore most often.
mm,
Um, and gosh, I love a black uniform, but I think some of the dark green with again, because no one else is doing it, like a chrome helmet with like black or
mm.
green wings. Oh, I when they started incorporating the wings into the helmet and the shoulder pads, I was like, this is iconic. This is beautiful. It's gorgeous. Um, I love Oregon incorporating the wings. So, uh,
Yeah, those were awesome. That was like those years were pretty cool. I kind of feel like nowadays they've sort of run out of ideas. Well, Nike doesn't do them anymore now that Van Horn Brands does them.
okay.
I kind of feel like the uniforms have taken a step back in their creativity. They're a little bit more predictable now. I don't think Tinker's involved with them anymore, but I have some opinions about what they could be and should be doing with the uniforms.
I
But
mean, let's hear it from the designer. What would you if you had the blank canvas now? How would you design the Oregon uniform? What would you change?
we'll pull up that tweet that's about the future vision, and That'll give you an idea. It kind of incorporates some of those pinstripes from the 2000, the Fiesta Bowl ones, and it carries almost like reflective lines from the knees and wraps around the body all the way up on top of the helmet. But also, again, is like combining the functionality with the design. So it's like if you had color changing ink, for example, if the fabric could change colors, like how cool would that be? You see those, and
Look at
then
now, you got like the textures all the way down.
yeah.
I mean,
So
you could be right on it. We don't know. We don't know what uniforms are going to look like in 2050. Uh, that's very cool looking. I like the number font too. Um, very modern. And hey, you know what? You got your O in the center back, just like you wanted. Uh,
that's it.
I saw
Yeah, but
I saw a tweet between you and Joey Harrington about that. I think you had posted, this might have been a few years ago, but pictures of. Do you still have one of those helmets, the Chroma Flare helmets?
yeah, I was actually looking for it before this call. I was going to bring it
Yeah.
out, and put it on, and it's packed away somewhere. But I have the very first helmet that was painted.
Okay. Very cool. I mean, that's got to
And
be a forever memento from that chapter of your career.
yeah, I've got that. I've got the Broncos and the Ducks uniform. Let's see if I can turn my.
There you go. Proudly on the wall, both of them. I need to get my hands on seeing one of the Oregon ones in person because I'm like, I keep finding pictures. I'm like, I mean, that fabric's black. It's not dark green. It's black. I finally found one picture. I don't know if the filter is in it or what, but I was like, okay, that's dark green. I need to see one in person to see the two-tone green. Um,
It's a fair point to make because we wanted to get it as black as possible, but still be
okay,
green.
there you go. Well, mission accomplished. I've been dying. I was telling my buddy who I do the podcast with, I'm like, man, I messaged one of the SIDs at Oregon because I'm like, I'd love to just go tour the Oregon uniform closet because I know they've got every uniform in there. I was like, I just want to go see it as a fan. I'm like, they should charge money for tours like that because I'd pay to fly out to Oregon to go see that. There's an
I'd love
idea
to
for
see it
Oregon.
too.
You and I should go together. You probably know a lot more people than I do. So
No, I get no love there now.
no
I can't
love.
use a T-shirt. No,
Man,
I,
well, we got to change that. I
it's
mean,
kind of like a little bit of an abusive relationship, honestly. Like I heard that Todd Van Horn is driving a Lamborghini SUV. That's what I'm guessing is like maybe a gift from Phil. And I can't even get a T-shirt. It's like I've contacted their equipment manager. Everybody, it's too much time has passed where they don't really care anymore.
the creator of the logo, we got to get Rick some love. We'll see what we
I'm
can do about that.
yeah, well they give Tinker Hatfield all the credit for it. Like Netflix did a show about it. Tinker.
Okay.
ESPN just they did a write up about it last year, and luckily they reached out. I really appreciate that they gave me a chance to share my side of the story. But it's a better story to say that legendary designer Tinker Hatfield did the O
Yeah.
than this guy that you've never heard of.
That's where I first came across your name was that ESPN article. That's what gave me the idea to do the podcast of we should do a deep dive and talk about our favorite templates. I'm gonna, after our interview, I'm gonna show every template and show like here's the iterations along the way and where they've been, where they are now, and it'll be a cool story. But nothing's better though, Rick, than hearing it from the horse's mouth or the Broncos' mouth, in this case, and hearing the story. So seriously, thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure, and it's been such a treat to hear it from someone who is involved. Because again, I am a huge college football fan first, and huge uniform fan. So to hear the design story is really cool for me personally. So I really appreciate the time, Rick.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me. And go Georgia, go Ducks.
That's
Uh,
right. Rooting for each other. Go
that's
go
right.
go win the Big Ten and stop Ohio State, Michigan, and USC. Not that they're a real threat, but haven't been for a while, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you having give me a chance to just share my story, and hopefully more people can look back and be like, okay, that's how we got to where we are. So I appreciate it.
Rick, thank you. Daniel, that's the history of the Oregon uniforms. I'm so grateful to Rick for that conversation. I mean, it's really cool just that he got to be on the team that, helped redesign the Broncos. That was kind of poorly received. And in hindsight, fans ended up loving it, and winning solves everything. How to make a duck look cool from, paint at a car show to designing a cool looking O logo using 2 stadium outlines, which is really cool. Everything that has come since. So look, this is going to be probably not your favorite episode on just audio if you're just listening. So check us out on YouTube because let's get visual with this, man. Hard to talk about uniforms without showing them. So Daniel, let's do this. Oregon has had, I'm looking, how many templates here? I need to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12
Just while
templates.
you're counting, I mean, this is a great time for everybody to find their way to our YouTube page at the Extra Point Pod. If you haven't been there before, go check it out. All right. Go, subscribe, all of the things. Just hit the notifications bar, all the things you might want to do, like our videos. That helps us out. But yeah, if you'll go there, this is going to be probably the best episode to watch with that. Also, our previous one that we did, March Madness, where it's got the interactive on the screen for when we went through the best college football teams in the history of the college football playoff era. So go check that out as well. But yeah, if y'all make your way there, that'll be, listen to the rest of it on video. Why not?
Yeah, switch over now. Now's a good point. Now's a good time. All right, there have been 12 templates, Daniel, from when Oregon did their big redesign in 1999 through we're recording this in spring of 2026. So I don't know if there's a new template for this year. 12 templates, and but templates meaning they might have 1,000 different combos, but it'll be on the same template, right? So like the first template was from 1999 and 2002, and I've nicknamed these. We've got the Mallards. Those are the ones they try to make the uniforms look like a duck. Also, some of these don't have official nicknames. Some of them do. I did run a few of these by Rick, and I've gotten approval. For example, the 2003 to 05
you guys
template.
Blessing, dude. Come on.
Yeah, Thunder and Lightning, because they introduced lightning yellow for the first time. So Thunder and Lightning seemed like a good name for those. The diamond plates, that's common among the Oregon fan base. Had the diamond plating on the shoulders. That's the first Oregon uniform I remember growing up with the number font that kind of curved in. If you're looking on screen, those are the diamond plates. In 09, we're starting to get into, again, the uniforms I grew up with. This is high school age for me, but 09, you've got the first wings that had the wing pattern on the shoulder, which you can see on screen. We get into wings 2.0, 2012 to 2014, that Marcus Mariota era there. 2015, kind of a one-off. We had wings 3.0, kind of just a little bit of a tweak on the wings 2.0 on that template. You get into 2016. 2016 had a variety of stuff. Some weird wing patterns in the shoulders, in my opinion. I'm calling these the themed ducks. They had several themed uniforms. 2017, another one-off. I'm saying ducks and stripes, a little take on stars and stripes, but ducks and stripes. They went with a duck logo on the shoulders and stripes on the sleeves. Calling that template the ducks and stripes. 2018 in comes, well, at least his first uniform redesign, Mario Cristobal. Very minimal, very large numbers. A little ducks wordplate on the left-hand side in the 2018 template. They tweaked that for 2019 and 2020. They put the O logo on the left side. Still some big numbers, not as big as the 2018 template. You've got the 2021 template. I'm calling the Flying Ducks because it was a mix of wings, and on the shoulder pads, that little triangle pattern you can see, that's they call that like a flying duck pattern. It's supposed to look like a duck's flying in formation from above. So calling those the Flying Ducks. And lastly, we've got Generation O, which is their latest redesign, where they've kind of mixed modern and throwback elements. So they've brought back the deep gold instead of the lightning yellow with the Kelly green. And these kind of have a classic look with big block numbers on the green and white jersey. They've got a more modern white jersey as well with their black jersey. I think they're calling that the Fly era, that has some diamond plate and carbon fiber duck wings on there. So it's cool because it's kind of a mix of a lot of what they've done. I really like this last redesign with Generation O, Daniel. But all that being said, those are all the templates. Daniel, do you have a favorite template that Oregon has made since the redesign of 1999?
I think the one, I mean, my favorite uniform combo is the one in 2022. So what were that template called?
The Flying Ducks.
The Flying Ducks. Yeah. There's some, in many instances, they're very similar.
Yeah.
themes here and there, and you're like, okay, I like this, I don't like that. But overall, I mean, that's one thing that I really like about Oregon. I feel like all of their templates, as they've changed since 1999, like you mentioned, they've been so different and identifiable that it is Oregon, that
Yes.
they've almost had an extra leeway than maybe, like a traditional school. Like, or I'm looking at a picture right now that has them against USC. USC could never do something like this without just ruining
No,
everybody's appetite, and then
I'd be
you look at
pissed.
some other just traditional schools that have really ruined it. Like, you have ranked, with the uniform rankings, you actually, there's, some Florida uniforms you like, that hey, they've got a good template. They've got the, but
They
when they
do.
wore those, I don't even know what we call them, the
Yeah. The
alligator
Gator Green, whatever.
camo, whatever they had, Gator Green, terrible. I mean, I have nightmares that even exists. And Florida fans have nightmares of Felipe Franks wearing them. But then you've got, Michigan State with the, just the God forbids. You don't want to be wearing those. They're just awful. I mean, there are children that go to these games. I mean, that's just uncalled for. So Oregon just doesn't have that to me. And you may call me on it, because I think obviously you've done your research, but there just is not. I mean, there's some that I may not prefer, or there may be like, hey, I like when they wear. Personally, I like when green and yellow is a really big theme in the actual uniform itself, rather than being more maybe understated. So maybe that's maybe more my preference of their uniforms. But dude, I always know it's them. Whatever it is, they're always so identifiable as a brand. And again, they get extra leeway, because even if it's something that's not the prettiest, it's like, well, dude, that's what they do. They wear a bunch of different combinations, and even if it's like a hot mess of color, it's like all the colors match. That's what's great. And it all makes sense. So that's kind of, I think the expectation everybody has for these Oregon templates.
Yeah, okay, so your favorite's the Flying Ducks. I want to get into my favorite and I'll respond. My favorite's the Wings 2.0. It's the, I say, the Marcus Mariota
Okay.
era. The wings were almost
Right.
iridescent and color changing. I'm showing on screen right now if you're watching on YouTube, but this was my favorite template. They had very few misses, in my opinion, in this template. They really leaned into the wing pattern on the shoulder pads, which looked really cool. You still had TV numbers on the sleeve. Like, you had the wings in the helmet. They even did with this template, like, face mask changing color, where the wings would start on the face mask color and go up on the helmet. This was, when I think of Oregon, like, this is the template I think of. It's my favorite. But the Flying Ducks era uniforms are probably my second favorite template. Those were extremely clean. They kind of combined a couple different elements and a lot of great uniforms from those. Okay, does Oregon miss on uniforms? I still think there are some misses, but I think the misses are twofold. One, I'll go into my least favorite template, 2016. The Theme Ducks template, there was too much going on. I could point to several of these, but the yellow uniform, the like weird shoulder pattern, like, is this look like it was pencil colored on? It bled into the numbers. It's just, I really didn't like that. And then on the white jersey and the green jersey, they had this weird feather pattern that I've never been able to figure out what exactly they were going for. And they had the collar that was different color, and then the sleeves were their own color. Like the white one, it's like a gray collar and gray sleeves with a weird like that template. And they use it on a few different jerseys, because the black one's just as bad. And they have a green one in this template too. And I thought it was a huge miss, especially after coming out of, you went from like the diamond plate to the Wings 2.0, Wings 3.0, to that. It felt very flat for me. And here's the thing: they fixed it because it only lasted 1 year before they got rid of that jersey with the weird feathers and weird pattern stuff. So I think that was universally disliked. That's my least favorite template. So yes, I think that Oregon has few misses, and I do think it's because they have a very long runway of they're supposed to be different and their colors match. I think their biggest misses come whenever they don't lean into their colors. And I'm not just saying green and yellow, because I think they have some of the best black and white uniforms as well. They're my one exception to wear your school colors and your school colors only, for what it's worth. Because again, they get the benefit of the doubt because they tried it.
Yeah.
They get the benefit of the doubt to me. It's Oregon. Yeah. Like they are the exception to the rule in every sense of the word. 2016 by far is my least favorite template. I'll say 2003 to 2005 isn't my favorite, but would I have thought that would have looked cool in 2003? Maybe. But, it's the panelist era. So they've got big panel down the side and down the pants. And, I mean, the Falcons did the same thing and the Broncos did the same thing. So maybe that's just a moment in time of panel jerseys, What about you, Daniel? What's your least favorite template?
Least favorite template? That's tougher for me to, I'm more of hey, this combination specifically, I didn't care for template itself. I guess, you could probably go panel as well for me, but that's, again, time and place.
Right. Had the cool number font, at least, which I associate with Oregon, that kind of number font.
They have a lot of redeeming qualities for every jersey that they put up. Every uniform that you see, there's something about it that you're like, okay, I could see where they were going with it. Like they were trying this and, it's like you said, they get headlong runway for whatever it came up.
All right, let's start here because I could list off 20 different of my favorite uniform combinations Oregon's worn. Daniel, do you have a least favorite? I have a couple I want to highlight because I want to end on a positive note because Oregon has so many hits for uniforms. Do you have a least favorite?
I do, and I think it's me being more of a snob about it because I know that you love them. So when you have your golden rule of, schools that don't have black in their uniform wearing black jerseys, specifically the one that sticks out to me, and I remember this, Jacob. I remember this during the season. We talked about this, and I held my tongue because I was like, all right, whatever. Jacob likes them, and he's the uniform guy, and I love Jacob, so I'm gonna let him roll with it.
Yeah.
But the uniforms I don't particularly care for when Oregon, again, does not have yellow and or green as a primary color, or sometimes it feels like it's omitted completely. In this case, Oregon on the road at Penn State last year, what a great game. That was honestly maybe the game that broke college football because Penn State was broken last year. And you complimented those jerseys after the game because obviously Penn State's got just classic jerseys, so those look good. And the uniform matchup, it may have been your matchup of the week last year.
It might have been.
So I didn't want to step on your toes. It could have been the honorable mention, but Oregon, standalone, looking at the uniform itself, it does look good. But the fact that it's supposed to be Oregon, that if I'm going to play by my own rules of, I like for a team to look like and I could tell it was Oregon, but I was like, dude, I need a pop of yellow or green or both somewhere. And it's just black helmets with the silver wings, white uniforms with the silver wings, and then black, or silver, whatever that is, numbers with the black outline, and then the black pants. There's a lot of silver, black, and white. I thought the Las Vegas Raiders were playing or something, but I'm just kidding. But they, it was one of these things where I was like, I don't know if I like that particularly. Again, it's a preference thing. I truly don't think that there's, how people say no bad pizza, they'll eat any pizza. I don't think there's a bad Oregon uniform that I truly would be repulsed by. I'm not repulsed by these. Again, they're clean, but do I like them? Do I prefer them? No.
Totally fair. Fair criticism. Again, this is usually the rules I play by. So I'm like, totally fair. You will hear no argument from me. Okay, my least favorite thing was when to me they don't look like Oregon. The webfoot uniforms. I think this is a popular among Oregon fans. Navy, gold, and black looked like
that was weird.
Like a UFL Cowboys.
They look like a service academy.
Yeah.
They were like a service. It wasn't just a service academy. It was a service academy throwback. That was the only weird one. You're right. I forgot about that one. There's
another one. I'm trying to think of the name for this one. They had a heather gray jersey. I'm showing a picture of it on screen. Matte black helmet, a heathered gray jersey with yellow numbers, like a weird number font, so you look like a clock or something, and black pants. Again, what are we doing? What's going on? Lastly, another black one, Daniel, but it's like an anthracite jersey with like it's the 2016 template, so it's already bad. Matte black helmet, anthracite pants, anthracite jersey, green numbers, which I don't love on that with the yellow outline. You got to go white or yellow. Like on a dark jersey, you can't go with a dark color. Like honestly, as dark as you can go, I think, are Ohio State's black jersey with red numbers. That's about as dark of a color as you can go because red still pops. But like you can't go green number on a dark jersey, especially when you have yellow in your color palette. You got to go yellow. And that template was just awful. Sure. So those are my 3 least favorite. Daniel, I've got like 20 favorites. You've mentioned your favorite being a part of that Flying Ducks template.
Yes.
Is that your favorite uniform? That green, yellow?
Yeah, the October. You have the date here for me, which helps me a lot. But October 1st, 2022, Oregon Stanford, green helmet with the yellow wings.
Yeah,
green jersey, and then the yellow pants. It just pops. It looks exactly like if someone forced me to draw Oregon from memory, this is probably what I would get closest to right here.
That's good.
Yeah, and then I didn't realize until you showed me some pictures, but that 2016 year of the duck uniform, where they wore the orange socks to look like the beak with the orange cleats, new favorite. So that, maybe not number one, but that's one of the ones you're about to give 20 favorites. So I have to have more than one. I feel like the pressure's on. So I will give that one my honorable mention. But it's one of the few times orange face masks can play. And that's, that was cool. It looks like the beak. I truly get that feel when you see those colors together.
I love that, Daniel. Yeah, that was definitely going to make my list, is the duck uniforms. That is one of these, like, not really your school colors, but the fact that a school can say, what if we try to make a uniform look like our mascot does, and then pull it off and it look cool, is special.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that is shout out to whoever designed that uniform, because that's cool that you pulled that off and it looks cool. Okay, it's just a couple I'll highlight off the top are, again, going back to the fact that I'm biased toward the Wings template, the Wings 2.0 template, because they had the iridescent numbers that changed color on the home and away jerseys. Daniel, I go back and forth with this. I like the forest green for Oregon with the lightning yellow. Like, that to me is Oregon's color comp. I know they've leaned into Kelly green, or that brighter green, whatever, since, probably the last 5 to 10 years, they've brought back Kelly green and leaned into it more. And I do like it. Like, I like the Kelly green. This is special for Oregon. They can lean into different greens, but my favorite too, Oregon made the chrome helmet popular, but not, and to me, this is where it's an Oregon thing, is prior to chrome helmets being popular, Oregon's redesign in 99 had that chromaflare paint, which did change colors. So that's my kind of like the lights hitting their numbers helmet and it kind of changing colors a little bit is very Oregon. So I've got one on screen. I think this away one is my favorite. It's a green helmet with a white jersey and green pants. The forest green, again, the iridescent numbers under the lights against Washington. It looks fast, Daniel. It looks fast. I like the helmet they did. They started doing the wings on the helmet, but then an O on the back of the helmet. That to me is very cool, very Oregon. Yeah. I like it. The helmet is like I can't tell if it's the helmet that's matte and the wings are chrome or vice versa, but I like that it's green wings on a green helmet, but they're 2 different textures, so it pops. The yellow O pops, the dark green pants. I think it looks awesome. And then the kind of the home version of that, they wore it in the Rose Bowl. It was the debut of the Wings 2.0. The Rose Bowl against Wisconsin at the end of the 2011 season.
Yeah.
I think this was Chip Kelly's last
Justin
game.
Herbert.
And it was the chrome helmet with the dark green jersey, dark green pants, and the iridescent numbers, yellow outline on that, very Oregon. I love lightning yellow. And so to me, the best lightning yellow look, Daniel, is when they go black helmet, yellow jersey, black pants. Like, I think you need some contrast in there. And the Flying Ducks template looks great with that color, with that combo. I'm showing one on screen. I like the yellow, white, yellow look on the road as well for Oregon. And again, I've got a Wings 2.0 picture on there. I love that one. Oregon's had a lot of good, again, I feel like they made so many things popular as far as, yeah, several teams had an all white look, but man, when Oregon does it, it looks so cool because they can have silver wings on a white helmet, and that looks really cool on the road. So they lean back into, Daniel, in the 2019 template, the minimal 2.0s. They brought back kind of this, I think they called it nightmare green. That's what they called it. So even darker than forest green, almost black. And with the iridescent numbers, it looked cool because depending on how the light hit it, the numbers would almost look black, and then they move a little bit and you get the green color. And to me, that nightmare green was kind of that black green, which I thought looked really, really cool. I love the one you called out. I do love their green and yellow. So anything with a green helmet, green jersey, yellow pants with yellow wings, I think is phenomenal. I think it's a great uniform. I love their all blacks, especially when yellow is a big part of that, because again, yellow pops. So I thought their wings 3.0 templates are my favorite blackout uniform that they've had because the wings were yellow and silver. I thought that looked really good on the black jersey. They had another good, the Justin Herbert Rose Bowl is very close to the one I mentioned. That's what you're saying. The chrome helmet and like matte black wings, or the nightmare green wings. That was a very good uniform. Okay, here's a hot take, Daniel. I liked the eggshell uniforms that Oregon did. I think those were disliked by a lot of people. I thought they looked sick. I thought they looked so cool. And it's on that Flying Ducks template, which I love. They had several iterations of the eggshell that I liked. In 21, there's an away uniform with a white helmet, white jersey, green pants. But instead of the iridescent, it's like the bright green numbers and bright green wings on the white helmet. I think that looks very good. Again, Daniel, this is where I'm like, okay, you're Oregon. Your colors are green and yellow. I want to see green and yellow in the jersey. And then I see a uniform like that has very minimal yellow, like just the Oregon logo on the pants. And it's like, man, but that pops and looks so cool. Oregon has a lot of good uniforms. A lot of my favorites are either the Wings 2.0 or the Flying Ducks template I have found going through there. But we'd love to hear from you. What are your favorite Oregon uniforms that they've worn since 1999? Throw it in the comments. Tweet at us at Deep South Daniel, at Jacob Carnes with a K. I'm going to tweet a few of these with clips from the episode that are some of my favorites. Again, I love college football. We love college football. I love uniforms, and it's cool that is now a way bigger part of the college football culture than it was 20 years ago, thanks to the Oregon Ducks, honestly.
Yeah.
And as I was growing up and getting to the age of falling in love with football for myself, of like understanding it and wanting to be a part of it and follow it more than just like, oh, it was on when I was a kid, of, I say, coming into my own college football fandom, Oregon had cool uniforms. And Daniel, aside from my favorite team playing on the NCAA video game growing up, if I wasn't doing some FCS school or the Georgia Bulldogs, I was choosing Oregon because I wanted to mess with all the combos and make my uniform of choice. And as ever, I'm like, Oregon uniforms are a part of the college football culture that I've grown up in. They have had an unbelievable effect on college football culture today. So I felt like it would be a really good idea to highlight the history of Oregon's football uniforms, how they came to be, and some of our favorites. So we want to hear from you. Send us some of your favorites on Twitter, in the comments below. We want to hear about it. So let us know your favorites. Daniel, any final thoughts on Oregon and their football uniforms?
I mean, this is definitely going into this. When you first pitched this idea at the beginning of the year, when we were just kind of doing some brainstorming, I was like, yeah, they'll probably, there's a lot of combinations and stuff like that. But the level to which the intricacies of every template, every decision, every design, I mean, this was definitely something. I appreciate Rick and his time being able to share with us, and you being able to interview him for such a good interview, being able to get that amount of time with him. We're grateful for that, and being able to see just kind of the impact that he's had, along with just Oregon on the sport. I mean, it's been great. So this is something that, it goes kind of unseen sometimes. You just kind of expect them to be wearing something crazy, but it's like there's so much that went into the decision-making process, and like the intentionality behind it is what keeps it from being tacky, I think. And I think that's probably maybe one of their biggest wins.
If you want to look more into Oregon uniforms on what they've worn in the past. I've linked down 3 websites that were really helpful for me. There's a Google sheet where someone has tracked every color combo that they've worn since 1999, along with the result of each game. And there's 2 great websites. Both I think are called Duck Tracker, but they're in different spots. One chronicles them from 09 to 15 and 1 15 to now. And so those are very helpful for me. Those are linked below if you want to check out more about that. I want to give a shout out to Jonah Henderson. You can follow him on Twitter. I'm getting his handle at Jonah N Henderson. He's an Oregon guy. He tweets a lot about uniforms, and he was helpful in my initial research and helping me find some good sources. So really appreciate his help with this project as well. Be sure to follow us at the Extra Point Pod on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That'll do it for this edition of the Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.